Iran's foreign minister arrived in Lebanon to meet the prime minister and the speaker of the parliament. The plane landing just hours after Israeli airstrikes hit outside the facility's perimeter. Huge explosions rocking the Lebanese capital overnight. Israeli fighter jets once again pounding the southern suburbs, a densely populated neighborhood, in what has been described as the most violent attack by Israel so far on Beirut. Israeli media reporting that the target was Hashem Safieddine, a possible successor to the slain Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. The main international road linking Lebanon and Syria has been cut off after Israeli airstrikes. No casualties have been reported. Israel claims Hezbollah has used the road to bring weapons from across the border from Syria. Over the past 10 days, hundreds of thousands of people have been using this road, mostly Syrians, to flee the fighting in Lebanon. Meanwhile, Israel carried out its deadliest strike in the occupied West Bank since the war in Gaza began nearly 1 year ago. The Palestinian Health Ministry said at least 18 people were killed on Thursday after the strike hit the Tulkarem refugee camp. The city is a militant stronghold in the northern West Bank. The Israeli army said the strike had killed Hamas's leader in Tulkarem. Hamas condemned the strike but did not confirm if any of its members were killed. For more, we can speak to our international affairs commentator, Doug Herbert. Hello to you, Doug. The war widening, the war worsening, diplomats scrambling to try to find de-escalation or some sort of solution, but that seems very far off at this point.
No, I mean, barely a day, you can almost say barely an hour goes by right now, Will, where you're not looking at these images of another plume of billowing smoke rising above a densely packed neighborhood in the suburbs, the southern suburbs of Beirut. But I think you were absolutely right to mention that this, in the context of what is a widening and escalating war that is being waged by Israel on multiple fronts. Israel, and obviously its adversaries. You know, Yoav Gallant, Israel's defense minister, recently said, when we talk about multiple fronts, he actually put a number to it. He said that this is a war being waged on 7 fronts. So we're talking Gaza, West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Yemen. I believe that's 7. But it gives you a sense of, yes, while some of those military battles now, some of the Israeli efforts on some of those fronts are maybe lower intensity compared to what they had been a couple of weeks or months ago. Gaza, for instance. Yes, the attacks, the strikes are still devastating. They are continuing. Even if our attention has shifted more now to the Lebanese front, there's still a low simmering war in Gaza and strikes continuing there. The Lebanon front, we have seen it expanding in recent days. We have seen more and more airstrikes. We have seen the limited raids, these ground incursions, with the question mark hovering over whether or not Israel can, as it says it intends to, limit those ground incursions, or as we've seen in the past, are they about to get bogged down in a long-running military, essentially occupation? When they went in 1982, they were there for 18 years before Hezbollah literally drove out Israel in 2000. And meanwhile, in Yemen, we still see targeted attacks on the ports there, Hodeidah, against the Houthis, in the axis of resistance, Iran's proxies in the region. So Israel also taking the fight to the Houthis there. So multiple front war. You could almost say a war of attrition on many fronts. A war that you might say, well, isn't it straining Israel, the IDF, the Israeli military's capacity? After all, isn't it stretched thin? They have been targeting each of these fronts in their own way, according to the Israeli forces. The Israelis seem to be planning a strategy where they can sustain this sort of war with varying degrees of intensity on varying fronts. The one in Lebanon right now is the one that is drawing perhaps our most attention, even as we are wondering what sort of attack, because Israel's promised a hard response to the the Iranian missile attack of a few days ago. So even as we're thinking of that, we're seeing these plumes of smoke. We're seeing that once again, the likely successor to Nasrallah, who was killed in Friday's attack, was targeted in this latest attack. There are reports that there may have been 11 strikes in those attacks where we saw those plumes of smoke overnight rising from that neighborhood, and wondering what is the fate right now of Safieddine, who you mentioned at the top of the show. Is he still alive? What are his whereabouts? We have no official word, no official confirmation right now, but we do know that this seems to be part of an expanding Israeli strategy where there are no punches pulled. They are going after the top leaders, hitting them off one by one, and they are lashing out in multiple directions, seemingly all at once.
And questions also as to how Iran will react, Doug. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei leading Friday prayers, his first public sermon in nearly 5 years, hoping to shed some light on what will happen next. You've been listening to him.
Yeah.
He's clearly very defiant this Friday.
Defiant, strident, obviously speaking to his faithful, to tens of thousands. By all means, I've been seeing the pictures in this packed sort of square in front of the Grand Mosala Mosque in central Tehran. What's remarkable about this, he gave a speech with a rifle by his side. When I say it was strident, he was basically unrepentant. He said that the October 7th, Hamas's October 7th attack on southern Israel, which resulted in at least 1,200 killed, with hundreds more being taken hostage into Gaza by Hamas and its allies. He said that was a legitimate attack. And he also said, and he linked the two, he said that Iran's latest missile attack is a legitimate attack. Let's not forget now, between last April's Iranian missile attack and the latest one, we have almost 500 missiles that have been fired from Iran into Israel, almost all of which have been intercepted, and there's been no reported loss of Israeli life, although there has been shrapnel falling, reports of some injuries. So Israel's defense has been just as remarkable as the fact that we've had these two unprecedented attacks on Israel itself from Iran in the space of the last 5-6 months. But it was a very, like I said, unrepentant speech. He said that when not just Iran, but when the Palestinians and the enemies of Israel are fighting for their own existential survival, when they are standing up and trying to stand up to what he terms the aggressor, in this case Israel, he said they have absolutely a legitimate and legal right to do so. He used those terms, legitimate and legal right, and he was very clear, emphatic. No one has the right to object to those who stand up against such aggression. He was implying that in the norms of international law, they have an absolute legitimate right to do so. So he's really drawing a very fine line. But what's interesting here at the same time is Hezbollah has been weakened, if not severely weakened, by the Israeli campaign in the past couple of weeks. The walkie-talkies, the beepers, the airstrikes, the knocking off of its top leaders, going after the villages, going after the rocket launches, the command and control centers. It's been weakened. And the question now is, how much has Iran itself perhaps been weakened if Hezbollah can't be sort of standing there as its proxy to represent its interests and to fight Israel? If Iran actually has to stand in, Iran's missiles themselves have proven no match so far for the Israeli military might and being able to intercept them and shoot them out of the sky. So it does raise the question, that's what everyone's listening for the signals for, what is Iran going to do next? It's a little bit in a holding pattern. Khamenei absolutely strident and making no bones about it, being very clear that a response is going to come in a forceful one, but he's saying there will be neither a delay nor a rush with the response, which sort of signals that they're still trying to figure out what next. We know on the diplomatic front, the president, who doesn't call, the buck doesn't stop at the president, stops with Khamenei. But the president of Iran has been making overtures and sounds that he would like people to think the score has been settled, that the buck can stop here, that Iran won't have to ratchet it up. But it's also been equally clear, if Israel were to retaliate, whether against oil installations, military bases, or even nuclear facilities, there will be a forceful response from Iran. Iran sees itself as being backed in a corner. It doesn't see itself as wanting war. It's trying to signal it doesn't want war, but it is ready to go to war and ratchet up once again and escalate if Israel, in turn, does the same.